Coming up in this Brightline construction update. This update looks at the progress on the final 4 bridges on the project still under construction in Brevard County, Florida from February to April 2023. The 4 bridges still under construction from north to south are the Eau Gallie River Bridge, Crane Creek Bridge, Turkey Creek Bridge, and Sebastian River Bridge. We'll start at the Eau Gallie River. Starting on February 26th, and by this time the bridge structure was more or less complete, and an initial layer of ballast had been spread across it. The temporary curb that had retained the ballast for the first half of the bridge, while the second half was being constructed, had also been removed, officially making this a single structure. While final punch list work was being completed on the bridge, crews were beginning the process of removing the temporary work trestle that had provided access for the crane throughout construction. In the water is one of the barges being used for the removal of the old bridge's pedestals. Here on the west side of the bridge is another barge with several of the old pedestals stacked on top that had been removed. They are being stored here while they are waiting to be hauled away. These pedestals are close to 100 years old at this point, with the old bridge here having been built in the 1920s. And here's a flight down the bridge, while there's only ballast on the second half of it. And heading back south. Now on March 19th, and ties for the future Eastern Main Line had been set across the bridge. Since this is a ballasted deck bridge, these are standard concrete mainline ties, just like the ties on the rest of the project. The ties are set north to where the temporary alignment currently is. At that point, the existing main line will eventually be cut and shifted east to connect with this new eastern main line, and another section of track constructed for the west main line to the Eau Gallie Boulevard crossing in the distance. Here's a closer look at the ties set across the bridge. The different coloration is simply due to how the ties had been stored leading up to when they were needed here, potentially stacked in a yard for several years until they were needed. Rail is staged on either side of the ties, ready to be threaded onto them and lagged down. The temporary work trestle was also closer to being fully removed, with only 2 spans remaining at this time. Extra rail does need to be dragged here for sections on either side of the bridge. Sections of the old main line that were removed in an earlier aspect of the construction here are off to the side, waiting to eventually be scrapped. Underneath the bridge, crews were down to the final 2 pedestals, still needing to be removed from the old bridge, along with the pipes that were supporting the work trestle. And back finally on April 9th, and the rail had been threaded onto the ties and lagged down. Rail was still needed on either end of the bridge. By this time, the temporary work trestle was fully removed and crane hauled away, providing the first unobstructed view of this new structure. All that remains of the temporary trestle are these wooden boards on the ground where the crane was disassembled. The forklift here will take care of loading all of them onto trucks to be taken away, likely to another project needing a trestle. Sitting on the track here is an MPR hydraulic rail threader. It picked up the rail that was sitting on either side of the ties and lifted and aligned it onto the ties. And here's what it looks like with the track skeletonized across the bridge. Ballast won't be dropped onto this new track until it is fully built to the Sarno Road crossing on the south, where work trains will then be able to access the track from CP Melbourne. We'll now move south to the Crane Creek Bridge in downtown Melbourne. Starting here on January 20th, as the temporary work trestle was actively in the process of being removed. The crane was using a vibrating head attachment to pull the pipes out, then temporarily places them off to the side until the trucks arrive to take them away. This allows work to remove the trestle to continue regardless of the truck availability. The pipe removal is the final step of demolishing each span of the trestle. It begins with the removal of the wooden decking and the metal beams that supported them. The cap that went on top of the pipes to support the beams is then removed, and then finally the pipes. This process takes 2 to 3 days to complete for each span. You can see several pipes and beams stacked on the trestle awaiting the next truck. While the trestle was being removed, crews were at work on the second half of the new bridge, applying the black waterproofing material. Once this is fully in place, track crews can then lay an initial layer of ballast across the bridge, followed by staging the necessary rail across it. Then ties can be placed. A little while later, a high rail truck arrived, escorting a regulator and tamper headed north. They bunched up at the crossings, waiting for them to be activated through downtown Melbourne. Coming back on February 26th, and the work trestle was completely removed. The new bridge was ready for the layer of initial ballast to be placed across it. The little pilings you see sticking up out of the water are not related to this work at all, and were there prior to construction beginning. With the trestle removed, this is the first unobstructed look at this new bridge as well. These two middle spans have increased clearance for boats, with about an extra foot of clearance available. Overall clearance on Crane Creek is determined by the US 1 bridge. Civil construction crews were finalizing work on the embankment on the south side now that the trestle is not in the way. Our final look here comes on March 19th, and over the previous 3 weeks, the initial ballast had been spread, ties set, and track constructed. Track was also built south through the Prospect Avenue crossing in preparation for it to be rebuilt. A Mark II tamper was sitting just south of the crossing panel. Wood ties are still used for crossings, as they can better deal with the forces of traffic crossing over and have some flex. A few panels of the old main line here are stacked up on the side, waiting to be scrapped. Underneath the bridge is a barge working to complete the final aspects of the removal of the old concrete pedestals from the old bridge here. The pilings that supported them have to be removed to down below the mudline, or bottom of the creek, as to not impede or damage boats. The exact depth is determined by the United States Coast Guard. The spans over Melbourne Avenue also offer increased clearance for vehicles. Here's an engineer's eye view flying across the bridge. Moving on, and the next stop is Turkey Creek and Palm Bay. Starting here on February 26th, and there is still some work being done to complete the second half of the new bridge. The ballast curb is in place on the edge, and crews are completing the final preparations to pour the ultra-high performance concrete between the beams. The concrete slabs on either end of the bridge are approach slabs. They help transition trains from the regular ground onto the bridge to provide a smoother ride and help control settling directly off each side. This ready mix truck will be used to mix the ultra-high performance concrete on site, which is currently sealed in the white bags in the distance, waiting to be mixed. You can see that process in the video linked above from when it was being done at the Sebastian River. Crews were also beginning to remove the temporary work trestle here. Coming back on March 19th, and the bridge was complete with track built across it. The track construction continued south to where the old mainline track needed to be removed up to. That much track was removed to allow crews to build up the base, allowing the new track to cross the bridge at a slightly higher elevation compared to the old bridge, which also helped increase the clearance for boats passing underneath. From that point south, it is the existing FEC mainline all the way south to CP Malabar. Trains are currently running on the all-new West Main while this work is ongoing. And here's a low-level flight across the bridge. Track is built north up to where cut and throw will occur at the current temporary alignment. Ties are also laid on the west side of the track to Palm Bay Road. And a flight across the bridge to the south. Almost all the temporary trestle was removed at this point, with only the last few pieces still needing to be removed. The crane would be dismantled and hauled away within the week. And here's a straight down look at the entire bridge. This bridge is small enough to be able to see the entire structure in this view. And finally here on April 9th. The track situation had not changed from my last visit, but the work trestle was completely gone. Crews were finalizing the embankment here, and the final materials were being hauled away. Speaking of the cut and throw here, here's a better illustration of what will happen. The track is currently in a temporary alignment, shifting traffic coming from the north on the eastern main line to the western main line across the bridge and to the south. When the cut and throw occurs, the track will be cut here, with the existing track on the north shifted east to connect to the eastern main, and the existing track on the west shifted to join the western main. Our final stop is the Sebastian River Bridge in Roseland. We're starting here on April 2nd, and track construction had begun across the second half of the new bridge. This is the largest bridge on the project, so while it was one of the first to begin construction, it will also be one of the last to be fully completed and demobilized. Ties and rail were laid all the way across, and one rail is connected to a section of the existing track to the north to CP Miko, just out of sight around the curve. Additional rail still needs to be dragged into place to complete the track. Crews were about halfway through removing the temporary trestle here. Being such a large undertaking to remove, 2 cranes have remained here. The yellow one is being used to actually disassemble the trestle, while the smaller red one is used to load the materials onto trucks to be hauled away. Rail is still needed on the south side to connect to some of the existing track through Roseland Road. A temporary alignment is in place to the south to shift trains from the new track across the western side of the bridge to the existing eastern main. A cut and throw will also occur here soon. A new defect detector will be installed just south of the crossing, and some of the equipment is already installed, ready for the track to be built and shifted. And here's a low-level flight across the bridge. Here's a closer look at some of the materials staged on the trestle, ready to be hauled away. Underneath, most of the concrete pedestals are still in place. With the rush to get the main structure complete and ready for track, the pedestals were left until last year. Here's a closer look at the barge being used to remove them, along with a few troublesome pipes from the temporary trestle. On the edge of the barge is a wire saw. It uses a series of pulleys to pull a continuous loop of diamond-embedded wire around the concrete or metal surface, allowing for clean cuts in otherwise hard-to-cut materials or locations, such as underwater. And here's a low pass flying south. Finishing here on April 9th, and work had begun on servicing the bridge. Over the past week, track construction had wrapped up, and ballast had been brought in by a work train. Here, a tamper was working to align and raise the track. Work train AFW1 was sitting around the curve to the north of the bridge. Due to some of the anticipated bad weather the weekend this was being filmed, which was starting to act up as I was flying, the cranes were laid down for the weekend. Additional rail had been brought in over the previous week, and it was now tied into the Roseland Road crossing as well. And here's a look at the tamper on the bridge. Here you can see the operator getting off to check the grade based on survey markings that are marked on the side of the bridge. And we'll wrap up with a look at the full bridge. My next bridge edition in a few months should hopefully look at all these bridges fully complete and in service. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe. Also check out my social media pages.